That whole thing with the Catwoman clause came into being because I was already involved with the wardrobe department doing practical metal parts for the Batman costume. The belt buckle that comes together, click, and the chest plate which anchors the forward parts of the cape had some metal spikes on it that had to behave in a very specific manner. So I was hanging around the wardrobe shop. Nobody gave any thought to the claws. I mean, obviously, even in a TV show, the Catwoman has claws. And so I kind of came into the edge of the conversation talking to the wardrobe designer, Bob Ringwood. What about the claws? She's Catwoman. She's got some kind of claws, right? Oh, yeah, we'll deal with that. Well, how does the claws come about? Shouldn't there be some reason, like how does she make them and what do they look like is the result of how she makes them. So I kind of volunteered, stepped up and said, let me develop something. I want to get involved in this, because obviously nobody else is. So I went home and made some little black claws. I knew that black would be appropriate because the costume was black, and it's Tim Burton, he loves black. So I made 5 little prototype claws. They gave me a casting of Michelle Pfeiffer's hand that had been done in alginate, so it was very, very accurate. And I presented these little 5 prototype claws to Tim Burton, and he loved them. And right away he ordered 2 complete sets of little claws, all different, but oh, by the way, he wanted them to flip open on cue. So I had to design some that were spring-loaded and that could be activated by a little string pull from underneath her glove. So I took a week at home and figured out how to do that and made a whole bunch of them and tested them and delivered them to the set for somebody else to actually operate on the day. And they worked. They worked fine. So I was on 2 different payrolls at 2 different points in time, and I don't remember what it was that I was working on in between, but I came in the middle of the city job during a really hairy rainstorm, and we were in this huge tin building that Boss had rented just for that one show, and the spouts that deal with the water that's being collected on the roof were not functioning, and the water was coming into the room. So we were having to put all of our stage cables up on apple boxes so that the big junction boxes didn't short out. And trying to shoot with this roaring rain beating down on the tin roof. It was, we were lucky to get the shots we did without shorting the place out or hurting somebody, from all that water. That was that had some tricky perspectives and some very, very difficult camera angles because we were built up on a tabletop because we had to do some articulations on a searchlight and a whole crowd of little LGB scale people on the ice rink and surrounding areas. So we had to be able to get underneath the set. But that set was built all the way up to the ceiling, and there was some times when you had a lot of difficulty getting the camera up there to get the right sort of Batman POVs, with all these people down below running little wires to make the people move around realistically on the ice. We did a lot of very convincing miniature snow using mixtures of baking soda and microballoons, and dressing the snow, just kind of putting it into the corners of rooftops and sprinkling it onto the surface of the set, and then taking little dry paintbrushes and making footprints in the snow and all those little miniature trash cans and stuff. It was a beautiful model. It was a lot of fun to work on that.
It's interesting the relationship between creativity and budget and what's possible. There's all kinds of ways that formula can work. You can have very little money and have a lot to do, and then have an environment, a director, a sort of a situation set up where you're empowered to do it the most economical way possible, meaning you work it out with the director and you find that you can actually do a lot more with very little money than, say, a very, very specific thing done with a lot of money on a bigger film where the needs are so specific and there's no flexibility whatsoever. And there's a lot of visitors who want to inspect the models and look at them close up, so you build them a lot better than is necessary for the screen. So you actually wind up doing less sometimes in those situations because it's what's dictated by the situation. So it isn't necessarily only what's possible with the money and the ambition level. It's also how creatively what your creative input is, how you design the shots, how you can steer the shots to say, look, this angle here gives you an equally big perspective and a very impressive shot, but it isn't exactly what you originally drew. But it still tells a story. And you get a director who goes, that's great. I love it. Doesn't matter to me. Other times, director, say, will come in, or producer will say, this is what I pictured, and this is exactly the way I want it, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts, and you have to do it that way. And say, well, it's not maybe the most efficient thing or the best way to spend the money, but so be it. That's the way it goes. So it's a very flexible sort of thing, this area of budget. If you can pre-plan and stick to that plan, that's where you always maximize the budget. It's when there's sudden surprises and changes, last-minute changes, or there's equivocating about what the shot should be, that you have to overbuild. And this goes for digital. It goes for any kind of effect, for anything that has to be made for a movie.
So I was at Stetson Visual Services for some time, and I got to start out as a model maker, again, working with Mark. And quickly, he and Bob gave me more responsibility and made me lead model makers on a few shows, and eventually gave me the role of what we call a crew chief, which is a project manager for a particular project. So instead of just being a model maker, I got to move on and direct the crew in terms of what they were doing and building. Batman Returns, building the zoo sequence, which started out as this beautiful zoo model that we photographed and then we blew up, which is always fun. My wife, Paula, started out as a runner. And when she would not be out on runs, she would come out in the shop and she'd help us. And then when we started Batman Returns, she started working on that. And the funny story with her is Mark Stetson. This is one of the funny parts. Whenever Mark wanted you to come talk to him, he would just get on the loudspeaker and go, Mark, he'd call your name and go, in this case it was Paula. He goes, Paula, principal's office. And she's like, oh God, what did I do? And so she'd go up there. Well, she walks in, and I wasn't there, but this is the story that she told me. She goes, I walked in and something to the effect of, he basically said, I hear you want to work as a model maker. And she said, yeah, I'd love to. He goes, well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to fire you. And to which, of course, she was shocked. And he goes, and the reason I'm firing you is because I have to rehire you as a model maker. So she went in a PA and came out a model maker and continued to work on Batman Returns and basically all the shows there until they closed. So she came in 1990, 89, 90, I think is when she came in there and stayed on throughout the end of the company.